Charles the Bold, Duke of Burgundy, the richest prince in Europe. He was killed by a group of Alpine farmers. They took his diamonds and went home. This is the story of Switzerland, the country every king in Europe hired or feared for 200 years, until they decided to stop. But how did a fractured group of mountain farmers become the deadliest killing force in Europe? And why did half the kings of Europe end up paying them just to leave them alone? To answer that, you have to go back to the beginning, before Switzerland. Over 2,000 years ago, the land we now call Switzerland belonged to a Celtic tribe, the Helvetii. Skilled metalworkers, fierce warriors. In 58 BC, they tried to migrate west. They walked straight into Julius Caesar. Caesar slaughtered them. Rome stamped its name onto the land, Helvetia, a name still printed on every Swiss coin today. For 400 years, Rome held the Alps, roads through impossible passes, cities at Geneva, Basel, Zurich, vineyards that still grow wine today. Then Rome collapsed, and the Alps split in two. Germanic tribes from the north, Burgundians from the west. 1,500 years later, Switzerland still speaks 4 tongues because of that division. The land passed between distant rulers, each one weaker than the last. By the year 1000, it belonged to the Holy Roman Empire, in name only. And in the forgotten valleys, the people did something strange. They governed themselves. No king, no bishop, no bailiff. Just shepherds and farmers electing their own judges, holding assemblies in open meadows. For 200 years, nobody noticed. Until one family did. The Habsburgs. They weren't yet the dynasty that would rule half of Europe. They were regional nobles from a small castle 30 miles north of the forest cantons. But they wanted everything. The pastures, the trade routes, and above all, the Gotthard Pass, the most valuable mountain crossing in Europe. They sent foreign judges. They imposed new taxes. They tightened their grip year after year. Until 1291, when the first Habsburg Holy Roman Emperor died, and the people in those valleys saw their chance. 3 of them meet on the meadow. Werner Stauffacher of Schwyz, Walter Fürst of Uri, Arnold von Melchthal of Unterwalden. By the time the sun is up, they have sworn an oath that does not exist anywhere else in medieval Europe. They swear that if any one of their valleys is attacked, the other 2 will come to its defense, that no foreign judge will set foot in any of them, that they will recognize no lord but the Holy Roman Emperor, and even him only if he leaves them alone. They write it down. 3 of them sign their cantonal seals to a single sheet of parchment in Latin, the Federal Charter of August 1291. That parchment still exists today. They are not founding a country. They don't have a name for what they're doing. They are 3 farmers' valleys swearing they'd rather die together than serve the Habsburgs apart. For 24 years, the 3 valleys do exactly what the oath promised. They refuse Habsburg taxes. They drive out Habsburg bailiffs. They declare themselves under no lord but God and the Holy Roman Emperor, and they choose which emperor to recognize. By 1315, the Habsburgs have had enough. Duke Leopold I gathers an army to make an example of them. To remind all of Europe what happens to peasants who forget their place. In November 1315, he sends 8,000 soldiers to crush them. The forest cantons have 1,500 farmers, no horses, no armor, and no military training. They wait on the wooded slope above a narrow alpine pass called Morgarten. The Habsburg army marches through the pass below, packed shoulder to shoulder between the mountainside and a marsh. The Swiss roll boulders and tree trunks down the slope. Then they come down with halberds. In one afternoon, 1,500 Habsburg soldiers die in the mud and the lake. The Swiss lose 12 men. Europe doesn't pay attention. They got lucky, the courts say. It was the terrain. But in those decades, something quiet happens. Lucerne joins the alliance, then Zurich, then Bern, Glarus, Zug. The original 3 cantons grow into 8. The Confederacy spreads from the high passes down into the wealthy lowland cities. And it builds the one thing that wins wars: a system. Every village now drills its men. Every canton now sends pikemen on demand. The Habsburgs notice. By 1386, a new Duke Leopold III is ready to finish what his great-uncle started. This time on open ground. July 1386. 4,000 Habsburg knights dismount from their horses in tight armoured formation, advancing across a wheat field outside the small town of Sempat. No mountains to hide behind, no marsh, no ambush. The Habsburgs form a wall of pikes, 5-metre spears 4 ranks deep. The Swiss come at them with halberds. The Habsburg pikes hold. Then one Swiss farmer throws himself onto the spears, and the wall breaks. Duke Leopold III of Habsburg dies on the field. His army breaks. His banner falls. Now Europe pays attention. The pattern is visible to everyone. Discipline, terrain, training. A formation any peasant could be trained into. War doesn't need aristocrats anymore. 2 years later at Naples, the Habsburgs try one last time. They lose again. And then they stop trying. By 1400, the original 3 forest cantons have grown to 8. They are the most feared infantry in Europe. And then, they came down from the mountains. And someone hired them. France went first. Then the Pope. Then Venice. Then Spain. Within a generation, every major army in Europe had a corps of Swiss pikemen at its centre, because every major army that didn't lost to one. By 1490, France alone was paying for 6,000 Swiss soldiers every year on permanent retainer. Whole valleys were funded by these contracts. Some cantons earned more from leasing soldiers than from anything they grew or made. Switzerland stopped fighting its own wars. It started selling soldiers. In 1474, the richest prince in Europe decided to make an example of them. Charles the Bold, Duke of Burgundy, the most powerful man in Western Europe, richer than the King of France, richer than the Pope. He had professional infantry. He had artillery. He had a treasury so famous it travelled with him in painted wagons. He invaded the Confederacy in 1474, 3 battles in 15 months. At Grandson in March 1476, the Swiss broke his army and captured his treasury, including the Sancy diamond and a jewel called the Three Brothers that had belonged to the Dukes of Burgundy for 100 years. At Merton in June, they killed 12,000 Burgundians in an afternoon. At Nancy in January 1477, they found Charles himself face down in a frozen pond, his skull cleft open by a halberd, half eaten by wolves. 22 years later, Maximilian I of Habsburg tried one last time. He lost. In 1499, the Treaty of Basel granted the Confederacy effective independence from the Holy Roman Empire. The Habsburgs never came back. They were done. And the Swiss were now Europe's deadliest infantry, undefeated, unmatched, hired by everyone. They had been winning every battle they fought for almost 2 centuries. Then, in 1515, near a small town called Marignano in northern Italy, they met Francis I of France. He had cannons, and German pikemen who had been studying the Swiss for 50 years. A Swiss cardinal named Matthias Schinner, who hated the French king, pushed the cantons into one final fight. In 2 days, 10,000 Swiss died. The Pike Square, undefeated for 200 years, was broken by cannon and arquebus fire. The Swiss went home. And 1 year later, signed the perpetual peace with France. It would never be broken in their lifetime. From now on, the Swiss would be paid by France instead of fighting her. 12 years later, in May 1527, the Imperial Army mutinied and sacked Rome. The Pope ran for his life through a secret tunnel toward Castel Sant'Angelo. On the steps of St. Peter's Basilica, 189 Swiss guards held the line. 147 of them died. The 42 survivors form the bodyguard that still stands inside the Vatican today. 500 years later, the Pope is still protected by Swiss pikemen. By 1530, Switzerland had stopped fighting its own wars. The cantons leased their soldiers, by the company, by the regiment, by the year, to whoever paid. France paid them, Spain paid them, Venice paid them, the Pope paid them. The pikes still marched, just for someone else now. The perpetual peace with France would hold for 276 years. It would end on a single morning in August 1792, on the steps of a palace in Paris. And then God broke them in half. It started with a priest. On January 1st, 1519, a man named Huldrych Zwingli walked up to the pulpit of the Grossmünster Church in Zurich and did something simple. Instead of reading the prescribed Latin lesson, he opened the Gospel of Matthew in Greek and started preaching it line by line in German. It was the kind of preaching nobody had heard from a Catholic pulpit in living memory. Within 6 years, Zurich had abolished the Mass. Bern followed, Basel, Schaffhausen, St. Gallen. Half the country went Protestant. The other half, the forest cantons that founded the Confederacy 200 years earlier, Uri, Schwyz, Unterwalden, Lucerne, Zug, stayed Catholic and watched their own confederation pull apart along a fault line that ran straight through the Alps. In June 1529, Zurich marched south to force the issue. Zurich's army was bigger. The Catholic cantons were outnumbered. They met on a field outside the village of Kappel am Albis, on the border between Zurich and Zug. They didn't fight, they got hungry. While their leaders argued for 2 weeks in a tent off site, the soldiers from both sides built a single fire on the cantonal border and cooked a soup of milk and bread together. Catholics brought the milk. Protestants brought the bread. They ate from the same pot. Switzerland calls it the Kappel milk soup, and it is on the national psyche the way nothing in any other country is. The First War ended without a single death. The second one didn't. 2 years later, on October 11th, 1531, the Catholic cantons launched a surprise attack at the same village. Zurich's army was caught unprepared. 1,500 men against 7,000. The fight was over in about an hour. 500 Zurchers died. Among them, carrying his city's banner, was Huldrych Zwingli. The Catholic soldiers cut his body into 4 pieces, burned them, and mixed the ashes with pig dung so that no relic could remain. 6 weeks later, on November 24th, 1531, the cantons signed the second land peace of Kappel. It said something nobody else in Europe was saying yet. Each canton would keep its own religion. None would force its faith on another. Catholics would stay Catholic. Protestants would stay Protestant. The Confederacy would survive only by letting the disagreement live inside it. That principle, that you can disagree about God and still share a country, was a Swiss invention, written in soup and blood at the same village 2 years apart. It was the seed of Swiss federalism. It was also the seed of Swiss neutrality. Don't pick a side at the federal level. Let the cantons fight their own fights, or refuse to. In 1536, in a city called Geneva that wasn't even part of Switzerland yet, a French refugee named John Calvin walked through the gates and made the place into what Europe would soon nickname the Protestant Rome. Geneva would join the Confederacy 3 centuries later. By that point, the country had stopped fighting wars of religion entirely. Switzerland had figured out, before anyone else in Europe, that the trick was not to win the argument. It was to stop having it at the federal level. And then Switzerland slept. For 270 years, the country that had invented religious coexistence sat out almost every war Europe fought. The 30 Years' War killed millions in the German lands next door. Switzerland watched it from a watchtower and did not move. In 1648, the Peace of Westphalia formally recognized Swiss independence after a century and a half of de facto self-rule. In the long peace, the country quietly got rich. Geneva became one of the first banking centers in Europe. The Jura Mountains learned how to make watches. The cantons sold their soldiers to whoever had money, but they no longer fought each other, and they no longer fought their neighbors. Then, on the morning of August 10th, 1792, the perpetual peace with France ended. 900 Swiss guards were on duty at the Tuileries Palace when a revolutionary mob stormed the gates. Louis XVI ordered them to lay down their arms. They followed the order. The mob killed them anyway. About 600 died on the steps and in the gardens, hunted between the hedges, surrounded at the central fountain, broken into small groups and slaughtered. 60 more were taken to the Paris City Hall and executed under a statue of Louis XIV. 200 more died in prison. The perpetual peace had lasted 276 years. It ended on a single morning on the steps of a palace in Paris. 6 years later, France came back as the invader. In 1798, Napoleon's armies ended the old Swiss Confederacy in a single campaign and renamed the country the Helvetic Republic, a French satellite run from Paris. It did not work. 5 years of uprisings later, Napoleon, of all people, gave up. In the Act of Mediation of 1803, he wrote that Switzerland was federal by nature. He restored the cantons. Then Napoleon fell. And in 1815, at the Congress of Vienna, the great powers of Europe signed a document declaring Switzerland would be permanently neutral, forever, by international law. Geneva, the city Calvin had walked into as a refugee 300 years earlier, finally joined the Confederacy. So did Valais and Neuchâtel. 22 cantons, one country, permanently neutral. On August 10, 1821, the Swiss carved a dying lion into a cliff face above Lucerne. The names of the dead of the Tuileries massacre inscribed in the stone above its head. Mark Twain called it the saddest piece of stone in the world. It is still there. Switzerland had survived the worst century in European history by doing what it figured out 200 years earlier at Kappel. Don't pick a side. Let the disagreement live inside you. And when the rest of the continent burns, watch from a watchtower. Then, almost everything fell apart again. In 1847, Switzerland fought a civil war. 7 Catholic cantons formed a secret alliance, the Sonderbund, and tried to leave. General Guillaume-Henri Dufour led the federal army. 25 days later, it was over. Fewer than 100 had died. Dufour ordered his men to treat the wounded enemy as their own. The Catholic cantons were not destroyed, they were reabsorbed. A year later, Switzerland wrote its first modern federal constitution. The cantons kept their religions and languages, but now there was a single government above them. After 557 years, the country had a centre. In 1863, in Geneva, a Swiss businessman named Henri Dunant founded the Red Cross. He had watched men die untreated at Solferino. Swiss neutrality became something new, a humanitarian platform for the world. The Swiss stayed out of both world wars, but the price was real. Swiss banks did business with Nazi Germany. Border guards turned away thousands of Jewish refugees. The country survived, but with stains it would spend 50 years trying to wash off. Today, Switzerland hosts the United Nations in Europe, the World Health Organization, the Red Cross, and the World Trade Organization. 26 cantons, 4 languages. The neutrality signed at Vienna in 1815 still holds, 211 years later. The country that began as 3 alpine valleys, swearing an oath in 1291, is now where the rest of the world goes to settle its disagreements. Switzerland is not a small country. It is a small country that figured out what others are still trying to learn. Don't pick a side. Let the disagreement live inside you. And when the rest of the continent burns, be the place where they come